The quiet stretch of a Mississippi highway became a battlefield of truth and power when two officers stopped Nathan and his young nephew, Malik. What began as intimidation quickly unraveled into a moment that exposed the rot beneath the badge. Nathan's calm demeanor hid the storm of a Marine's discipline as he faced off against two corrupt officers bent on asserting their authority. With Malik silently recording the unfolding drama, every insult, threat, and abuse of power was captured on camera. The officers underestimated Nathan's resolve, but the moment shifted when backup arrived, led by a black officer who wasn't blind to the truth. What followed wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a showdown that would leave those officers questioning their every move and leave the audience questioning the very system itself. Before we journey further into this unforgettable story, make sure you're subscribed to Epic Story Moments. Hit that bell icon now so you never miss an incredible tale. Join our community by liking, sharing, and commenting to keep these heartwarming stories coming. And hey, tell us where you're watching from. We love connecting with you all. It was a peaceful Sunday evening in Arlington, Mississippi, a small town where time seemed to move a little slower. On the surface, the town exuded charm, but beneath its quiet exterior simmered an undercurrent of unspoken tension. Nathan Williams, a middle-aged man with a quiet but commanding presence, was driving home with his 8-year-old nephew Malik after a day spent fishing at a nearby lake. Nathan was a man of few words. His years in the Marines had given him an unshakable demeanor, a kind of calm strength that others couldn't help but notice. He had long since left that life behind, choosing instead to focus on family and finding peace in the simple moments. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm, golden hues across the Tulane road, Malik chatted away in the back seat, proudly showing off the small fish he had caught. Nathan smiled, his eyes softening as he glanced at the boy through the rearview mirror. The road stretched ahead almost empty, save for the occasional pickup truck rumbling by. Nathan felt content, relishing the simplicity of the moment. But as he passed a rusted sign marking the town limits, the tranquility shattered. Red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, painting the inside of the car in bursts of ominous color. Nathan's stomach tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of recognition. He knew what these lights often signified in this town. Without hesitation, he pulled the car to the side of the road, his movements calm and deliberate. "Stay quiet and keep calm, Malik," he instructed gently, his voice steady but firm. The boy nodded, his small hands clutching the fishing rod he refused to let go of. The police cruiser came to a stop behind them, and two officers stepped out. One was tall and wiry, his sharp eyes scanning the scene with predatory intent. The other was stocky, his swagger betraying a sense of authority he seemed all too eager to abuse. Nathan kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, his every movement deliberate and composed, a survival instinct honed over years of training and experience. "License and registration," the stocky officer barked, his tone laced with hostility. Nathan nodded and reached for his wallet slowly, handing over the requested documents without a word. The wiry officer circled the car, his eyes roaming over Nathan and then Malik, as if assessing how best to play his hand. "In a hurry?" he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "No, sir," Nathan replied evenly. "Just heading home." The stocky officer smirked as he examined Nathan's ID. "Nathan Williams, huh? You sure you belong around here?" Nathan met his gaze through the window, his expression unreadable but resolute. He didn't rise to the bait, refusing to give the officer the satisfaction of a reaction. The tension was palpable as the officer handed the ID to his partner, who retreated to the cruiser to run a check. Malik fidgeted in the back seat, his young eyes wide with worry. "Uncle Nathan, are we in trouble?" he whispered. Nathan turned his head slightly, his voice steady and soothing. "No, Malik. Just stay quiet and let me handle this." The wiry officer returned, shaking his head. "Nothing on him," he muttered, almost disappointed. "Well, isn't that a surprise?" The stocky cop sneered, leaning closer to the driver's side window. "Thing is, your brake light's out. You know that. Nathan frowned but kept his tone neutral. It was working fine earlier. Are you sure? The officer's smirk widened, his eyes narrowing with menace. You questioning me? Nathan's jaw tightened, but he held his composure. Not at all, sir. Just saying it was working when I checked. The officer straightened, tapping the roof of the car. Step out of the vehicle. Nathan complied, moving slowly and deliberately as he opened the door and stepped onto the gravel shoulder. He could feel Malik's frightened gaze on him, but didn't look back, not wanting to escalate the situation. Got yourself a little passenger there, huh? The stocky officer remarked, nodding toward Malik. Cute kid. Shame if he had to see something unpleasant. Nathan's fist clenched instinctively, but he quickly forced them to relax. His voice was measured, though his words carried a warning. There's no need to involve him in this. The officers exchanged a glance, their smug expressions faltering ever so slightly. They hadn't expected Nathan's calm authority, and it unsettled them, but they were determined to push their power play further. The wiry cop slammed the passenger door shut, startling Malik. The boy shrank back, gripping the fishing rod like a lifeline. You got a problem following orders, Mr. Williams, the stocky officer taunted, stepping into Nathan's personal space. Nathan stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. I don't want any trouble. I just want to get my nephew home. The officer chuckled darkly, his smirk widening. Trouble? Oh, you're making it real clear you don't understand who's in charge here. Nathan's mind raced. This wasn't just about him anymore. Malik was watching, learning. This was a lesson in strength, integrity, and how to face injustice without losing your humanity. The officers escalated their search, forcing Nathan to endure a humiliating pat-down. But he never faltered. Every movement, every word, was a calculated act of restraint. His quiet defiance spoke volumes, unnerving the officers in ways they couldn't articulate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officers realized they had no excuse to detain him further. They returned his belongings with thinly veiled frustration, their power play thwarted by Nathan's unyielding composure. As Nathan drove away, Malik's small voice broke the silence. Uncle Nathan, are they always like that? Nathan glanced at him through the rearview mirror, his voice steady and warm despite the storm inside him. Not always, Malik, but when they are, we stand tall and show them who we are. Always with strength, always with dignity. The car disappeared into the horizon, the sun's last rays casting a golden light over the road. Malik sat quietly. The day's events etched into his young mind, a lesson in courage and justice he would never forget. It was a calm Sunday evening in Arlington, Mississippi, a small town where time seemed to move at a slower pace. Nathan Williams, a middle-aged man with a commanding presence, was driving home with his 8-year-old nephew Malik after spending a peaceful afternoon fishing. Nathan, a former Marine, had left behind a life of structure and discipline to focus on family and tranquility. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the two-lane road as Malik, excited, held up their modest catch, his voice animated with stories of their fishing adventure. Nathan smiled warmly, catching glimpses of his nephew through the rearview mirror. The simplicity of the moment was a comfort, a reminder of what really mattered. As they neared the town's limits, a sudden flash of red and blue lights in the rearview mirror shattered the serenity. Nathan's grip on the wheel tightened, not out of fear, but with a quiet understanding of what those lights often signified in their town. Calmly, he pulled to the side of the road, instructing Malik to stay quiet and still. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. One was tall and wiry, with an air of predatory arrogance, while the other, stocky and overconfident, exuded an aura of authority often misused. Nathan, ever composed, kept his hands visible on the wheel, a habit ingrained from years of training. License and registration, the stocky officer barked. His tone was sharp, almost hostile. Nathan responded with calm precision, handing over his ID and paperwork. You in a hurry or something? The wiry officer sneered as he circled the vehicle, his eyes scanning it with suspicion. "No, sir," Nathan replied evenly. "Just heading home." The stocky officer examined Nathan's ID with a smirk, his expression full of mockery. "Nathan Williams, huh? You sure you belong around here?" Nathan met the officer's gaze through the window, his face an unreadable mask of restraint. The officers exchanged glances, their smirks suggesting that this stop was more than routine. As one officer ran a check on Nathan's ID, the other leaned against the car, glancing at Malik in the back seat. "Got yourself a little passenger there, huh? Where are you coming from?" "Fishing," Nathan replied curtly, refusing to provide more than the necessary details. When the wiry officer returned with a disappointed shake of his head, he muttered, "Nothing on him." "Well, isn't that a surprise?" The stocky officer sneered. He tapped on the car roof. "Step out of the vehicle." Nathan's jaw tightened. With measured movements, he complied, opening the door and stepping onto the gravel shoulder. Malik's small face pressed against the window, worry etched into his features. The stocky officer crossed his arms, his tone dripping with menace. "Cute kid. Shame if he had to see something unpleasant." Nathan's hands clenched momentarily before he regained control. His voice was low but firm. "There's no need to involve him in this." "Oh, we'll decide what needs to happen here," the wiry officer snapped. He walked to the passenger side and yanked the door open, startling Malik. "Step out, kid." "No!" Nathan interjected sharply, stepping forward. His voice, calm yet unyielding, carried a weight that made both officers pause. "He's a child. He stays in the car." The officers hesitated, caught off guard by Nathan's composure. It was clear they weren't dealing with someone who would cower under their pressure. As tensions escalated, the stocky officer leaned closer, his hand hovering near his holster. "You're real close to making this worse for yourself, Marine." Nathan held his ground, his eyes locked on the officer. "You've already made it worse by involving a child." The air was charged, thick with unspoken threats, when Malik, trembling in the car, grabbed Nathan's phone. With shaky hands, he began recording the interaction. "What's that kid doing?" the wiry officer barked, noticing the movement. Nathan stepped in front of the window, blocking the officer's view. "He's doing what you fear most, making sure the truth comes out." The stocky officer's face reddened. His confidence wavered as the reality of the situation sank in. "Think you're smart, huh? Think you can outsmart the system?" Nathan's lips curled into a faint smile, more resolute than mocking. "I don't need to outsmart the system. I just need the system to see who you are." As the officers faltered, backup was called over the radio. But Nathan's calm defiance had already shifted the balance of power. He wasn't just standing up for himself. He was teaching Malik a lesson about courage, integrity, and the importance of holding onto one's dignity, even in the face of injustice. What happened next would echo far beyond the roadside confrontation, sparking questions about accountability, power, and the resilience of the human spirit. On a quiet stretch of highway under a sky thick with clouds, Nathan leaned against the hood of his car, his Marine badge glinting faintly as the wiry officer held his wallet, flipping through it with a mocking grin. "Marine, huh? That's supposed to impress me," the officer sneered. Nathan met the taunt with silence, his expression calm. He had learned long ago that words could often do more harm than good in the wrong hands. But his quiet resolve seemed to agitate the wiry cop, whose smirk grew sharper as he opened the car door and motioned for Malik to step out. Malik, Nathan's nephew, froze, his small frame trembling as his wide, frightened eyes darted between his uncle and the officer. "Leave him alone," Nathan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The wiry officer chuckled, clearly enjoying the reaction. "What's the matter, tough guy? You're not in charge here." "I am." As if on cue, the stocky officer stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster, the silent threat unmistakable. "You don't want to make this worse for yourself, Marine. You're on thin ice." Nathan's fists clenched at his sides, his breath slow and deliberate. He wasn't afraid. Years of discipline and countless battles had taught him to control his emotions, even in the face of hostility. But when Malik let out a quiet, scared sob, something shifted deep within him. A line had been crossed. Nathan's sharp gaze moved to Malik, whose tear-streaked face ignited a protective fire within him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Malik, about teaching the boy to stand tall, no matter how stacked the odds might be. Nathan straightened, his voice firm but calm. "Step away from him." The weight of his words froze the officers for a brief moment. There was no yelling, no bravado, just the quiet authority of a man who didn't need to prove himself. The wiry cop smirked again, though his confidence faltered. "Or what? You gonna show us your Marine tricks?" "Tough guy." Nathan didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Malik and the officers. His movements were deliberate, calculated to de-escalate without ceding an inch. "Malik, stay in the car," Nathan instructed. The boy hesitated, then nodded, retreating into the seat and closing the door behind him. "You're real close to resisting, Marine," the stocky officer warned, his voice louder now, his hand grazing the butt of his weapon. "You want to see how far we'll take this?" Nathan tilted his head slightly, his calm gaze never wavering. "You've already gone far enough." The air grew thick with tension, an electric silence hanging over the confrontation. The wiry officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner for guidance. Nathan's stillness, his refusal to be rattled, seemed to unnerve them. In one swift, precise motion, Nathan reached out and plucked his wallet from the stocky officer's hand, tossing it onto the car hood. The action wasn't aggressive. It was controlled, a clear message that Nathan wasn't playing their game. "I'm not going to fight you," Nathan said, his voice steady. "But I won't let you intimidate a child to prove your authority." The stocky officer's face turned red with fury. "You don't give the orders here," he barked, stepping closer. "You're right," Nathan replied, his voice like steel. "I don't give orders, but I also don't take them from men who abuse their badges." The wiry officer lunged forward, reaching for Nathan's arm. But Nathan sidestepped with practiced ease, letting the officer stumble forward. From inside the car, Malik watched the confrontation unfold. His small hands trembled as he reached for Nathan's phone, which had been tossed onto the hood earlier. Remembering his uncle's instructions for emergencies, Malik unlocked the phone and pressed record. Nathan caught the movement and glanced toward the boy. "Malik," he said softly, a warning in his tone. But it was too late. The wiry officer had seen the phone. "What's the kid doing?" The cop barked, stepping toward the car, his voice betraying a flicker of panic. Nathan blocked his path, his broad shoulders a wall between the officer and Malik. "He's doing what you're afraid of, making sure the truth comes out." The stocky officer's hand twitched near his holster, but his bravado was crumbling. "You think you're smart, huh?" The wiry officer snapped, desperation creeping into his voice. "Think you can outsmart the system?" Nathan's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement, but of quiet confidence. "I don't have to outsmart the system. I just have to let it see you for who you really are." The wiry officer lunged again, but Nathan caught his wrist, his grip firm but controlled. "You don't want to do this," Nathan said calmly. The officer froze, his face twisting in humiliation as Nathan released him. Every movement deliberate. The distant wail of sirens finally broke the standoff. 2 patrol cars arrived and younger officers, including a black officer with a steady gaze, stepped out. "What's going on here?" the black officer asked, his voice measured as he took in the scene. Nathan nodded toward Malik. "My nephew has everything recorded." The younger officer reviewed the footage, his expression darkening with each passing second. Without hesitation, he turned to the 2 corrupt cops. "Turn in your badges." "Now." Protests erupted from the stocky officer, but the wiry one shook his head, defeat etched into his features. "Just do it," he muttered. As the corrupt officers were led away, Nathan stood quietly, his arm around Malik. Later, as they drove home, Malik broke the silence. "Uncle Nathan, are you mad?" Nathan glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his voice soft. "No, Malik. I'm proud. You did the right thing." Malik's small smile lit up the dark road ahead. This wasn't just a lesson for Malik. It was a lesson for anyone watching, a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet and steady, standing up for what's right, even when the odds are against you.